Okay, welcome guys. So I think today what we're going to do is a sort of run through of the full tune process. We're going to see if we can do it in exactly 1 hour. So almost everybody now I'm noticing is moved to Betaflight 4.5, 4.5.1 or 4.5.0, right? So in Betaflight 4.5, angle mode was dramatically changed. And the first little clue about that is if you slide down here, you'll notice that there's this little additional thing down in the corner. And I've mentioned this many times before. What do these numbers represent? So basically what you're looking at here, this number to the right is the actual maximum angle limit of angle mode. And the number to the left, I think Betaflight devs will probably describe it a bit better than I can, but basically it's a kind of index of the sensitivity of angle mode. But when you have a linear rate, what you'll find is that this first number and the second number are the same. But what happens is if you change the curve, the shape of the curve to say add some expo, then what's going to happen is this first number is going to decrease and it's going to change the sensitivity of the way angle mode feels. But just know that angle mode was always and is still always essentially tied to the stick angle. So it's a kind of more of a position as opposed to a rate. So don't think about angle mode in terms of degrees per second. Angle mode is if you're at center, you're at your level. If you put it all the way to the right, in this case, you're going to get the copter at 60 degrees. If you go halfway, you're going to be at 30 degrees. If you go quarter the way, you're going to be at 15 degrees. But that's only because we have a linear curve here. So if you instead change that curve to be 150, okay, you'll notice down here your curve changes, okay, but now look at also that first number changes. What this means is now if you go full stick, you get 60 degrees. Half stick is not 30 degrees anymore. Half stick is going to be wherever this is in degrees, not degrees per second, but in degrees, right? So think about it like the full point on this Y scale here, where it says 300, that's going to be 60 degrees angle. Halfway on a linear will be 30, but you're lower than that now when you put an expo curve in there. So it's essentially putting an expo curve on the angle itself, right? So what I do is I always set the center and max at the same point. Now, it doesn't matter whether this is 300, 300, or 100, 100, or 1000, 1000. You'll get the exact same result. Notice down here, sensitivity is 60, right? So no matter what you do there, if you match the center and the max rate, you get a linear rate, and the angle sensitivity is the same. The second point about angle mode is, so if you do set a linear rate with this setting, it's just going to be super snappy and you might find it out of control. So what I typically do is go into the CLI, drop that maximum angle down to about 30, just for the sake of doing wobble tests. Okay, so I'm going to leave it. That's how I'm going to stop with the angle mode rant because I've discussed this elsewhere as well. But Troy is going to do
this super complicated. Is why I just do it manually, bro.
Exactly. Well, fair enough, right? I know switching over, but there's a lot of guys that can't do that. Yeah, and you've got a lot of space there, right? Lots of people are doing this in small space. And
I guess one of my questions though is, like, you talked about the snappiness, and one of the reasons why I don't do it in angle mode is I've noticed when I've tried to and or in other situations and using like angle modes, like when you're flicking the sticks, you end up causing, like you said, like a lot of that jerkiness that doesn't really exist when you do it manually. I don't know. To me, it just seems like it's more aggressive in angle mode. Like you're able to more aggressively let on and let off of the stick by flicking it almost.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just leads to weird data. So anyway, I
think part of that is
feels like they can't do it to just try it, because quite frankly, the settings I had there, you can't really lay this thing over. Like it's moving so slow, you're not going to get it out of control. So anyway, just my thoughts. Give it a try.
I still try to encourage people to at least try it in angle mode, and usually they find it a bit easier. So, but if you do find it super snappy, remember Betaflight 4.5 has a lot of parameters related to angle mode. So I'm not going to say much about them, but there's a couple in particular. If you look at these settings, feed forward, there's a new feed forward that's just tied to the angle controller. Now, it doesn't have any impact on the results. You can turn it on or off and you get the same result. But just know that that's set defaulted at 50, and that's partly where that snappiness comes from. So, if you want, what I typically do is I would set that to 0, and then I would take that angle limit and drop it down to about 35 or so, just to make things a little bit easier. Okay, so we're defaulted here on the slider. So what we're going to do first is we're going to test the P to D balance. This is a 6-inch rig. So if you were doing this in angle mode, you could just leave your feed forward settings. There's one point, Troy, why angle mode is a little better, because then you don't have to fuck around with that. We're going to drop dynamic damping. We're going to drop the I term a little bit. And one thing I do with the pitching is I drop the damping just a little bit to make the numbers match here. Now the question is this a good starting point? I think this should be pretty good for a 6-inch. For a 5-inch, I might bring the damping a little lower to start, but I think that's reasonable. So we'll hit.
Out of curiosity, you wouldn't bring the P up at all? Because I found that running it at that low at P, sometimes you run into, it's a lot quicker most of the time to tune because you can find that balance. Usually that's the window anyways.
So are you saying the master multiplier?
I was just saying the P gains in general. Like I typically will start with.
You mean the PI tracker?
Yeah.
No, I don't touch it. Here's the reason. And the problem I have with that is when I like to communicate with people and they say they have a damping of, say, 1.4, I know what that means.
Okay.
Right? But if as soon as you introduce the PI gain, you don't know what it means anymore. So
right, but if you're not talking to them and people are doing this themselves, I know me and you have talked at times where you're like, yeah, sometimes you actually want to start with higher P.
No, I would start with a higher master. So this is effectively the same thing by starting with a higher master. But the difference is that
you got to remember, I go back to the days where we were tuning without sliders, where me and you, like where we were inputting.
That's right.
P of 50, a P of 60. And then we were going to the D and going 20, 30, 40, 50.
That's
50.
right. And actually, Betaflight 4.3 had sliders, but it was different. It was the old nomenclature that Mark Spatz had. I think about it a little differently, where I would say, if you know that you're going to be low in the tuning window, so in other words, the drone has a relatively low power to weight. Maybe you got a big camera on it, you know it's going to be sloggy, and you're going to need those, the overall PIDs to be pretty high. Then what I would do is instead start that master at a different point.
No, that also is how I do
and what's easy about that then is there's another case, for example, where there are some 3-inch drones that are extremely powerful. Even at default, they're oscillating. And so there's a good case where you might want to drop that down even lower depending on the drone you put in there, right? But either way, when you start that ratio still is the exact same meaning. So like when I end up with lifters are almost always, they end up at about a damping of 1.6, somewhere between 1.5 and 1.7, depending on the lifter.
Yep.
But that's not going to be the same if this is up. I'm not going to know what it is. So, and if everybody does this and they arbitrarily put this wherever, then when they come and I say, I got my damping at 1.6, I'm like, I have no idea what that means, what this ratio is now, because I have to look at the numbers and that's fair enough, but there's some value in being able to just communicate a slider position too, right?
Yep.
Hey Brian,
I
have one question about this master. So you said that if a drone is very powerful, it's better to start with the master lower, because I got this problem with my drone, and it was completely overtuned already at 1, and actually, I always thought that having, because my experience is very limited, I always thought that having a high master is good, but now I end up with a master at 0.9.
Well, yes, having a high master is good, but it's obviously relative to the drone that we're talking about. So again, it's not like this is good across the board. Okay, that's obviously not, because it depends. If you have a drone that has a super power to weight ratio, little ripper, it's just going to fly away. You're going to get PID feedback, right? You're going to get D-term feedback for sure. So it's not a big deal to have to drop that. Don't be concerned. The absolute value of this number is not what you want to be thinking about.
Good.
Not the absolute value. But yeah, sometimes there are other things that limit your ability to push that master. And it's got to do with either not enough filtering or sometimes too much filtering. Too much filtering can actually limit this as well. If we filtered the heck out of Troy's drone right now, we could probably get a flyway at defaults. Okay, there's a reason why when you go into the filters, you'll see the sliders. Notice that if I take this slider all the way to the right, you'll see current slider position may cause flyaways. Well, guess what? If you keep dropping this all the way to the left, you get the same flag. Okay, because if you increase enough filter delay, now you're going to get a flyaway at this point, and you could even have to drop this way down to be able to stop that. So where this is able to be put is going to be in part depending on the power of your drone, but also how you've set up that filter, how you've adjusted your filters.
Will the filter influence the step response curve?
It won't have a dramatic impact on the step response curve, but if, for example, you weren't filtered enough, you could get a noisy step response curve for sure.
You have an example of that? What a noisy...
It doesn't look like a smooth curve in the step response, so that's true. But there's different types of noisy step response curves. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but sometimes, just to give an example, oftentimes what people see is a kind of jagged, not a very regular noisy step response curve. That's usually an indication of low frequency broadband noise that's related to electrical stuff. But if you see a really high frequency perfect sine wave in your step response, somebody posted one the other day, it looks like almost like an oscillation in your step response. That is a good indication of improper motor filtering. Because motors are going to be a specific frequency, right? It's going to be a very narrow band, and it's going to look like an oscillation. So whenever you have something like that's at a constant RPM, like a motor, the signal is actually going to look like a perfect sine wave, right? Because it's a very narrow band at a specific frequency. And that is going to be manifest in a step response as a little sine wave popping through it, right? And the peak to peak distance there, the period of that, you know it's motor when it's somewhere around, say, somewhere between 100 to 200 hertz. And the other clue is you should see that on both pitch and roll, and it should be across all the axis. The post that somebody made the other day, I noticed it was only on roll, so that's more indicative of something that's not the motor, but it's certainly a narrow band, and it's going to be probably related to something resonating. Okay, totally got ahead of ourselves here, but I should, before you get started there, Troy, should we make an adjustment to your filters here?
Yeah, go ahead. This was running, again, like this was prior running 4-bladed props and a big heavy camera on it. So it was running 4 notches and the lower RPM filter. I see.
So
go ahead and reset all that to higher. I would go 100 on the RPM probably.
Yeah. It's a 6-inch, right? So I'm thinking somewhere around 90 or 100 for sure, yeah. So
I usually do 100 on the RPM on this one, or 90 works too, and then I usually do 90 or 80 on the dynamic.
Okay, let's do 80 to be safe because we don't know for sure. In terms of your dynamic notches, I'll probably leave that for now. Just let me ask you this: when I change this, are you okay with the fact that this will be changed across all your settings?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got that saved somewhere.
Yes, and I was already planning on dropping a whole nother tune on it anyway.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll hit save on that. Then why don't we go back to the notches default?
Yeah.
Or do we expect a dangerous resonance?
No, but I would do 2. I usually keep 2 on these guys, and 500, and then min of again like 100. Like if I have the RPM low, I usually keep that one high.
Okay, so you want to bump this up to 100 as well?
I mean, I'd go at least 80. Yeah, I mean, I'd at least match the gyro, right? Or,
okay.
I don't know. I mean, and then 500 on the Q. 600 is fine on the max. It's not going to go any higher. It goes to about 480, 500.
So maybe for people that are new to this as well, let me just quickly go over the basics about filters. There are 2 types of filters. Most of you guys know that. There's only 2 types of filters. Even though when you look in Betaflight, it's like, holy shit, what the hell am I looking at? It's overwhelming. There's so much going on there. So let me break it down. These are low pass filters. So low pass, the best way to think about a low pass is that it's a filter that lets low frequencies pass and attenuates or dampens high frequencies. So that's where it helps to think about it that way. Things below that cutoff pass and things above or get filtered. But it's not exactly true, because if you set a cutoff of 500 hertz, you're still going to get attenuation below that cutoff. It's just not going to be as much. Okay, same over here. This is D-term filtering. This is also using just low pass filters. Then the second thing that we have is notch filters. So notch filters are very narrow, but they cut really deep. Now, both of these are inherently notch filters. They use the exact same code to generate the notch filter. The only difference between the RPM filter and the dynamic notch is the way in which they center the notch. So what do I mean by center? Meaning the notch has a steep cut at a specific frequency, but the frequency in which you put it at is determined by the way these filters work. So with respect to RPM filtering, what it does is it creates a notch filter for each motor. So there will be a notch associated with motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. And each of those notches are going to be completely tied to the RPM. So as the RPM goes up, that notch is going to go up in frequency. And it sits right at the heart of the vibration that that motor is producing. Now, there are more than 4 notches associated with RPMs, because it also does like a second harmonic and a third harmonic, and that's what this number's for. But just for the sake of simplicity, RPM filters essentially take a notch and center it based on the RPM of the motors. Now, below that is the dynamic notch filter. That's a little more sophisticated. In a sense, it's more sophisticated, a little more complex to describe. But what it does is it produces notches in the same way as the RPM does, but it centers them based on what it sees in the spectrum. So if it sees a peak down here, like some kind of resonance, then that notch frequency will go down to that location. If it sees something momentarily up here in the higher frequencies, it'll jump up. So dynamic notches are going to be constantly moving around, just looking for peaks. Sometimes it's good to have more than one of those available, because if you have one notch here and it sees a peak down here, some kind of resonance frequency, then it's going to be a good idea to have a second one looking around for anything else that might be happening. Otherwise, this one guy is going to leave the post once in a while and jump up around to try to find something else, right? So there is it's a bit of an art playing with dynamic notches to try to deal with resonance peaks. But the way Troy has it set up here now with 2 notches is pretty sufficient to deal with most, simple scenarios. And it's not going to cost you very much in terms of filter delay, as long as that min frequency is not set too low. If you set that min frequency really low, then it's going to allow the notch to potentially go really into low frequencies. And that's where notch filters can really start to cost a lot of filter delay. And again, filter delay is your enemy, right? We don't like filter delay, so we want to reduce filter delay as much as possible. Some people have asked me, what's filter delay? The short answer is any real-time system that's using filters is going to have filter delay. Offline, for example, PID Toolbox has smoothing algorithms. You might have seen that in there. That's a filter of sorts, right? But the difference between offline filtering is you can do what's called symmetrical or bidirectional filtering. Well, actually, the word for it is zero-phase filtering. But online, you're moving in time and you have to deal with that, right? And again, lower cutoffs will produce more delay. So filtering is all about optimizing the tools that you have to try to minimize the amount of filter delay, but dampen as much of the noise as possible. So it's a trade-off, right? There's a trade-off between how clean you want the gyro versus how much delay you're willing to accept. All right. And the other thing about delay is larger the rig, the more tolerant it is of delay. So when you get down to a 6-inch or 5-inch, ideally you want to get that gyro filter delay well below 2 milliseconds. Down around a 3-inch, the optimal, like these little cine whoops, which have become very popular, you want to get that gyro delay down to close to 1 millisecond if possible. That's the measure that we get in PID Toolbox, 1 millisecond. Okay, let's start our log rate at 3200. Since Betaflight 4.5 and now in 4.6, gyro scale is actually completely gone. Going forward, it's probably a good idea to use the debug called FFT Freak. That's the one I would default at. Because what that does is it will put the dynamic notch information into the debug. Now, why do I care about that? Well, because we already have the RPM information in the log file. We have the pre-filtered gyro. We have all the information we need, but the only thing we were missing was the information about the dynamic notches. And I think it's just a nice feature added to that. And when Betaflight 4.6 comes out, you're going to have the capability to run up to 7 dynamic notches. It might seem ridiculous, but some large crafts that use special ESCs like APD 200 amp ESCs, these ESCs are not capable of doing RPM filters. And so having the capability to have more dynamic notches is really valuable there. And we'll be able to view all of those notches in PID Toolbox. So yeah.
And I have one question regarding the dynamic notches and logging those. As far as I understand and I noticed, only for one axis the dynamic notches are logged, yes?
Correct. So it's a bit...
That will be fixed in the next release of Betaflight, or like...
No. So let me answer that question. You can change the axis that's recorded in CLI.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So by default, it's set to do roll. But you can set it on pitch or, yeah. And so just keep that in mind that when it plots in PID Toolbox, it's plotting the roll dynamic notches on the roll axis, but it's also plotting the roll DNs on the pitch and the yaw axis as well. So I probably should remove it so it just plots on the axis that you have set.
Regarding the angle mode with the AutoVolvo script, you said you are lowering the max angle, right?
Of the wobble script, no, I would, let's leave the wobble script for now. I'm just talking about angle mode, you doing it manually. But yes, you should lower the angle. That's not the wobble script that we were talking about, though. The max angle is a Betaflight parameter.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're always like lowering it, even if you are using the auto script, right?
Sorry?
Like you would always lower the max angle limit in Betaflight.
Yeah. Yeah, in Betaflight 4.5.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, Betaflight 4.5 is different than Betaflight previous versions with respect to angle mode. It's massively different. In previous versions, you don't have to worry about it. You can just run it as it is. Yeah.
It's not too short, the wobble?
Possibly, Sometimes when you do manual wobble, I think you get a little bit better data. So that's another reason why I'm not super fond of the wobble script. I'm a little disappointed in it, but it had good intentions, and I thought it'd be really good for some people. I still do it. I mean, if I got to do something in this office here, it's pretty tight, so it still is pretty decent. But there are some minor issues with it,
Well, with me, it crashed immediately into the wall on my Tango, Crossfire Tango. So I said, okay, no wobble script for me.
Yeah, there's that too. So because it's not you doing it, it can freak you out. But you again, depending on the angle mode settings you had, that's probably playing into it. So it's possible you hit that wobble script and you had 60-degree angles, right? That's gonna be that, of course. Unless you're really
it wasn't even the wobble script yet. I just programmed it, and I armed it, and immediately it went forward to the wall, and I
okay. Let's be clear here. You programmed it wrong. No offense.
Sure,
if you programmed it and you just armed it and it went crazy, then you programmed it wrong. So there is details about that.
I will share you some screenshots later, okay? And you can check it because.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Even if you did what you thought was perfectly right, you should be still responsible for testing it without actually arming it. What I'm saying is you could open Betaflight, look at the model, and test your wobble script before you've actually armed the copper.
Yeah, I also could see it on my controller. It was a very minor thing, but I was like, okay.
Okay, so are you telling me that on your controller it looked right, it was doing it right, but then...
No, because I armed it, and then I saw immediately also on the controller it didn't look right, so I stopped it immediately.
Okay.
It was with a 2-inch drone, so it didn't matter. I was just curious to it. But
Okay, yeah.
Then I tried the process 4 times, and I thought maybe it's the Crossfire Tango that it doesn't use another XTX. I don't know. It uses something else, not Freedom TX. And I thought maybe
Okay.
there's something there. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. It probably like I've only tested on Open and Edge TX, so I can't confirm that it works on Freedom TX. So yeah, just again, it's I'm sorry, it's user error. You got to know when you're stepping into a domain that is not tested. You guys should be able to see the picture on screen now, right? Okay. First thing I want to see is how our filters are doing. Okay, so this is a clean rig. This looks really good. And this is even during a wobble test, so that's really good. We're definitely over filtering. So we don't need that second low pass, as Troy mentioned, that we don't need that out here. Really all we have is a motor noise. So I would probably go into the filter queue though and raise that. But again, we're only at 2.3 milliseconds. I think these numbers could be brought down.
I usually go to a PT2 on this one and drop the second.
Yeah, PT2 on that. And I would raise the Q factor to about 1,000
This is the overing
on
test.
RPM filters. What's that?
This is the overing test. Overing.
No, this was a wobble test.
This is a wobble test, but it's still good, yeah.
Yeah. That's actually a wobble test at 1.2, it looks like.
Yeah. And this is pretty low motor noise, right? Below -10 there, that's pretty good. The pitch axis is a little bit, so that's really good. Okay. Nice set of results here, eh?
Yeah.
Now if you had done a little bit longer tests, this would have been flattened out a little better.
Yeah.
But it's good. So this is PD 0.8 is the green. Okay, wait now. They're not ordered here.
Nope, they're out of order. Yeah, but that's what I was trying to say was, so the bottom two are first. Yep.
So you can actually go 1, 2.
Oh, you can do that now? I did not know that works now.
You could always do this with.
Fucking helpful, dude.
You could always do this with the.
I did
step
not know
response.
that. I was going to ask you the other day if you could make it to where we could drag them up
Yeah.
and down or move them up and down in the list, man.
Yeah, you can do this, but you can't do it in the spectral analyzer. It's a little trickier. There's reasons for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 4939 is technically the best.
Actually, in the future, I'm going to have a little button that you can press here that's going to plot up the exact slider positions on Betaflight.
And what does n equals to something means? Actually?
That's the number of observations. So the number of data points that it pulls out from it, right? That go into the average of that curve. Yeah. So the more wobbling you do, the better the curve. So you probably want the n up around 100 or 150 or so. That'll smooth this out a little bit better. But it's pretty good, right? And what value would you guys pick here? So this is slider 0.8, 1.0.
I would go with green.
Between
green.
yellow and green.
I would interpolate between 3 and 4, maybe, but I would go with 3
Yeah.
over 4.
So that's 1.2, 1.4.
Mm-mm.
So if you're not sure, then you can go to 1.4. So we can plot the fourth one. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's that. We'll plot that one alone.
I'd even say 1.5 might work better, but
Yeah.
who knows?
I would reduce the filtering.
I would reduce the filtering as well. The second thing, what would you guys do?
Maybe pushing more the master.
Pushing the master. Anybody else?
Rise the
I would align the pitch.
the pitch. Rise the pitch.
Would lower the dim.
Ivan, you win the purple star. I would definitely boost the pitch axis.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first thing I would do is, like Cedric said, I would relax the filters a bit and simultaneously let's boost the pitch axis a bit.
Yes.
What do you mean by boosting pitch axis? Like lowering the D term?
So right now we have an even roll and pitch balance, essentially, because we lowered the pitch to match as closely as we could the roll.
Yep.
Typically, you need more authority on pitch than you do roll. So that's why already in the pit controller, it's already a little more biased to where you get more, higher new numbers at stock on pitch. So we're just going to push those back up and you're keeping the master multiplier where it is, you're only moving the pitch, its gain up by equally moving P and P.
Yeah.
And I'll offer just a little piece of like just my own personal experience. I have found I have racked my brain at times when I've gone through the entire process and I swear I've picked all the right numbers and I think I'm on the right place. And I get to that final 5 or 10% of the tune where it's like heavy throttle or heavy movement. And I just get something out of the blue that I don't like. I will say 9 times out of 10, it's the PD pitch or the roll to pitch balance is just off. And so in whatever that movement or that high throttle stab is, you're getting just an excess of something, whether it be D or lack of D or something is just needs a little more oomph. So definitely play with make sure that you're not just hyper focused on, hey, I picked the right numbers, roll and pitch, and they're going to work together. They actually have to kind of be, again, balanced. And that also something else I was going to say earlier, make sure you're doing this with like how it's going to be flown, not leave the GoPro off or use a smaller battery or, make sure that it's set up and it's balanced as it is. Otherwise, you're going to beat yourself up at the end of your tune, just trying to get that last bit out of it and you'll never find it. So anyways.
So what we're going to do is put the pitch tracking at about 1.2 and the damping at 1.1. Okay, hit save on that.
Yep.
Next thing we're going to do is go to filters. We're going to kill low pass 1. I would go to, I would set your D term filters different too. Either take the slider and bring it up a little bit or go to like a PT2.
I like a
Whatever you think.
PT2 with the low toast off.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'd probably go static there, but it's up to you. I go static and bring the slider up to about 90. And the D term slider till you see 90 on the something like that. That's probably reasonable. It's a 6-inch, right? A 5-inch, I'd probably try to get it to 120. Hit save. Now, one more thing. This is going to be valuable. Go to CLI. You're not going to have any issue with doing this. Set space RPM underscore filter Q. Yeah. Let's set that to, you can do 1,000, no trouble on this. And then save. RPM filters are just so pervasive. They work really well. And even with 1,000, you're going to get some residual motor noise coming through, but your low pass filter will pretty much take care of that residual. And watch that filter delay drop down. It's going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
So if you can do one more test, Troy, double the length of time of the previous, I think we're going to be on to something here. Getting started. So
I think we can raise also RPM mean speed to.
yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
All right, well,
80 is.
I was taking notes. You know me, I don't like to
Yeah,
take
no,
notes.
I agree with Ivan. I would go filters, RPM min. You're probably good at 100.
Yep.
The weight for RPM weight filter.
Yeah, you could probably do that. I would leave it for now.
Okay.
Because one of the things with the weight I'm always cautious of is we don't have enough information about what happens to those harmonics at higher throttle. We don't get that during hover tests. So if you really wanted to be nitpicky about playing with weights, I would probably wait until you go to the field and get a test and see if you can afford to do that. But you're going to save a lot here, and I think we'll be below 2 milliseconds on the gyro. And for a 6-inch, that's about as good as you need. Okay, wobble test. While Troy is doing that, somebody else had a question. Yeah.
Me,
Okay.
I would like to know because you said the dynamic filtering is not getting a lot of latency, but when you increase the Q factor, decrease at 400 on or 300. Is it making any issue with the latency?
Un attimo, me lo sblocchi? Chiama la mamma, per favore.
Okay. I don't know who that is. Is that Ivan? Sorry.
Sorry.
So what you're saying is we changed the Q factor from default in the dynamic notches. We didn't really think too much about it, to be honest. And I think in Troy's case right now, we probably could have just left the default dynamic notch setting. Okay. Either way, the amount of filter delay that's going to incur with the current settings is minimal. And Troy previously had it set to deal with a larger camera platform that he had on there. So we just didn't put a lot of thought into it.
Okay.
That's the short answer. So this is pretty neat. You know, Troy is down in Texas. Cedric, you're in France. Ivan, you are in Italy, I think.
Yeah.
Italy. I don't know where else.
Yes. Yes.
Andy, I can't remember where you're from, Andy, but we're all over the world here. This is a great day. Probably one of the biggest turnouts I've had so far, so that's great. I got to figure a way to make sure that this is not confusing for new people, because you guys are the same faces I keep seeing all the time.
It's the first free weekend after a while, so
Yeah.
So you've got Germany as well.
Who?
Oh,
You've got Germany as well.
Oh,
It's
Germany.
Newcastle.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, I'm cooking at the moment, so that's fun.
I am in my car.
You look funny, Cedric.
I always
Really,
wonder
really
about
do.
you, Cedric, because you're always in that black. You have this black background. You're like,
Yes, because I was playing with my friend, sending some pack. Just
so is it literally dark in France right now?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I am alone in a motorbike terrain.
Okay. Okay.
Some across.
Yeah. Well, you can see the sun shining here. We got some, but it's freaking cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bon.
I hate
Gray. Otherwise, it is a gray and
Yeah.
cloudy, and not colder than you.
Yeah. You're in Germany too, are you?
I'm in Czech Republic. Yeah, the next.
Oh, Czech Republic, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Right alongside there.
European
What's that?
represent.
European representative. Exactly.
Actually, I have a lot of snow currently in Poland. We have a lot of snow. It's
You're in Holland, are
all
you?
day. Poland. P.
Oh, Poland.
Oh,
Poland. I was going to say.
we
I
have
would-
a lot of snow. We'll try to show you maybe.
And Troy is down there. You guys don't know heat like Texas, hey?
Yeah.
So if you can
we just
see
had
it.
like a crazy northern blast.
Can you see over my window? The snow is there. On the
Yeah,
top?
nice. Oh, yeah. That's not snow, my friend. You don't even know snow. What are you talking about? So, Troy, you can tell when you hit the stick end here. So, you get used to line of sight. When you can hit the stick ends doing your line of sight, you're doing okay. Now, if you can do that and then turn the drone facing you, now you're talented.
That I can't do. Turn the drone towards me and I'm crashing, bro.
I've seen some guys do line of sight, and that blows me away.
I've gotten slightly better. It's if you fly wings, you can do it.
Yeah.
It's a whole mindset of you just have to take yourself out of the I'm looking at the nose of the drone, and you have to put yourself in the I'm observing it in the sky, and it's just two different mindsets.
Okay, look at this. Look at the filter delay on the gyro now. This is the gyro here. You have some energy around the motor frequencies here, which is not a big deal because it's partly exacerbated by the aggressive.
That makes sense. I always thought that's what it was. I just wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
that's all that is. So that's your first harmonic here. So this encompasses this thing here. And if you look at your second harmonic, you can see it's going to encompass probably this. Partly that. This here's the second here. It looks like there is no third, to be honest. So that's interesting. Now you could, as Ivan suggested, you could play with the filter weights here. It looks like the third harmonic is non-existent. Actually, sorry, I don't have that turned. This is not pre-filtered. Yeah, there is maybe a small third harmonic, but it's certainly very weak. So you could probably take the RPM filter weight of the third harmonic down quite a bit. The value in that is pretty low because those notches are going to be situating themselves at high frequency, so you're not going to be gaining a whole lot by doing that. But you're already down at 1.25 milliseconds on the gyro, so that's
You don't
Fantastic.
worry, out of curiosity, just because I typically will I try to hit like a 2.0 just because I like to have some headroom with my filtering in terms of like bent props and other things, like loose motors or something happening like mid-flight that I just, if is 1.25, honestly, like you're good with that? Because
I'm good. No, totally. This will make a big difference in flight performance. And the thing is, if you get a prop strike or whatever, what you want to do is utilize dynamic notches, which you're doing. And that's not costing you anything extra.
Yeah,
Those are still there.
The thing in the back of my head I always worried about was like, what happened? You know, what happens if something slightly changes? Like, I would just hate for it to fucking slam out of it. You know what I mean? So, sorry for cursing.
I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Again, it's a 6-inch, and it's 5 or so. I think you're going to notice the flight performance difference, though. I have tended to move towards using a higher Q factor on the RPM filters, and I think it makes a pretty significant difference in prop wash. So, but either way, this looks good. It's decent. The D term is the one you really want to look at, and everything there is below our -10 cutoff, except for maybe pitch. And that's in part due to the fact that we're boosting the PIDs on the pitch axis as well. So that's not ideal, but it doesn't matter which D setting you have here, they're all sort of peaking there. So even if we just pick the first one, which I think was sufficient anyway, you're right on the cusp, but I think it's okay.
Look at this stuff.
Yeah, we could probably add more D-term filtering if you wanted. I think there's a benefit to, if you were going to filter more here at all, I would filter just the D-term, not the gyro. Let's go back to our step response and see what our result was. So, roll pitch. You can see that the latency is roughly 21 milliseconds on roll and about 23 on pitch. So yeah, so the only thing left to do then is to boost the master multiplier.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. We got some more results. So this looks pretty good. You can certainly see more noise in the motor sigs at the top end here. Keep that in mind, right? If we go back to that first test, look at the motor sigs here. See that?
Well, you can also see it on arming on the ground before takeoff.
And look at the master. Exactly, yeah. So you can see that here in what Troy's saying, when you arm, you look at the D term in yellow, and whenever you see this kind of like coming up pretty high here, you're gonna get a bit of ground effect. But let's leave that for a minute. Let's go to our step response and take a look at these. Okay, nice set of results. I love seeing a full set of results. I rarely do these, systematic all the way up. So continuous drop, maybe it's plateauing a bit near the end here. So you can see that as we increase the master, we don't really change the curves dramatically. But I do see a little bit of like this ripple here. I've talked about this before. It's a little bit complicated to describe, so I won't go into it, but it's a good indicator that you're probably pushing a little bit too high. That's certainly at this one. This is master. Is this master 2.0?
Yeah, I went 1.3, 1.5, 1.7, 1.9, 2.0.
Okay, you're bold. Like I say, anybody doing this, I'm going to recommend be cautious about just blindly doing this without looking at the data first. You got to know your rig. You got to know yourself.
D-term barely got higher than the P though, so I wasn't too worried.
Yeah, this looks good though. It looks really good, very systematic, and you can look at the roll to pitch is still a little bit slower on pitch for any given, right? 18, 20. Here's 18 to almost 18. 17, 18, 16, 16.5. So it's pretty close. So technically we could still push the pitch axis a little bit, but I think it's decent.
Bring the term off the pitch just back down a little bit, right? Just because you don't think so? Okay.
No, I mean, what I'm saying here is that pitch is still slower than roll.
Right.
Meaning technically, if we could boost the pitch axis a bit more. But as we talked about, doing that is also going to generate more noise, right?
I was just talking about D-term on pitch axis. We pushed it up 0.1. I was just saying maybe we pull that back down 0.5 because it is a little hotter than the roll.
Possibly, yeah. Are you referring to this here, this tendency here?
No. Right before this test, we did a couple of things. We changed the filters.
Yeah.
We boosted the D term on P from 1.4 to 1.5-ish. And what I'm saying is we almost didn't do that. That was my suggestion, kind of, and we kind of came to that. I think we went too far with that D based off of the hot D term on arming and all of that. That's just a little higher.
You're right. And actually, that would also explain why the latency is a little higher here still, too.
So I was thinking roll it back 0.05, if not back the whole 0.1, just back to 1.
Yeah. That's a reasonable point for sure. There's another way that I look at latency, and I think it's really important. Eventually I'm going to bring this over to the step response because a lot of people miss this. They don't realize it. There's a thing here called set point to gyro delay. What that does is something called the cross correlation lag between the set point and gyro. So it's actually a much better index. Well, I wouldn't say much better, but it's a better index of the true difference between the red and the white curves, this distance. And that's what we want to be using really as an index for whether the master should be boosted or not, okay? So if we look at these tests, you can see now, this is master 1.1, 1.3, 1.5, is it? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9?
3, 5, 7, 9, 2.
So there's no difference between 9 and 2. So we can just get rid of the very last one. So let's do that. Okay?
Yellow.
So the drop is less than a millisecond here. Less than a millisecond there. Less than a millisecond there. You know, there's not huge gains across the board. And you can see the noise increasing certainly, yeah. I think I would probably go back to this orange.
And reduce damping a little bit.
I agree.
And possibly reduce damping, yeah. So I would drop the dampening to 1.1 there.
Yeah.
And I would bring the master slider back to, I think, the 1.5 point. That's the orange, right?
Yep.
I would bring the eye turn up to about 0.7 maybe for a 6-inch, something like that, 7.5, yeah. And then feed forward. I wouldn't leave it off, certainly. I would probably go at about minimum 0.5, yeah. There's some value in that, especially if you anticipate putting a bit of weight on there. Now, put your rate profile back, though, right? Don't forget that.
Shit, thank you.
There you go. Give it a rip.
May I ask a maybe stupid question? I'm doing this for quite a while now, and I know that we have to get the latency of roll and pitch as nearly as possible together. But what for me, I need a reason for doing this, and I made up my own reason to have like the same response on both axes.
Okay.
Is that?
It's not. It's less about the same response on both axes. It's more about the maximum response that's achievable, really.
Okay.
Okay. Why do we want lower latency at all? That's the question you want to ask yourself.
Yeah, sure. To get to not get into phase problems and stuff like that because of the delay and the reaction of the PID loop to the other circumstances.
That's right. And you're going to maximize prop wash performance and all that stuff by having the delay lower. So pitch axis is going to play into that, right? So that's the reason mainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And think about the world of KISS and FETTech. They don't even know. How would they ever know? You just blindly punch in some numbers, and I think it's snappier on pitch. That's good. Mind you, we know KISS flies amazing, so that's the proof right there. But by the way, you're probably looking at this thinking, what the hell is that thing on the front? Look at that. That's a Hero 4. You remember those?
Hey, dude, I still run a Hero 9. That's not even my oldest one. I run a Hero 5 for my other second backup.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to say, Brian, dude, thank you so much. I joined, honestly, just expecting, hey, man, I've been meaning to join one of your little get-togethers. I've never been to one. Obviously, me and you have spent tons of time together, me paying you mostly for that time. So I just appreciate this, free tune, so to speak. I think this was awesome. I think if anybody, we did this in literally 7 log tests, essentially, which really it was 6 because one was split into 2. I think anybody can learn to do this in like 30 minutes or less. I've learned so much from you that probably could have knocked this out and been somewhere in about 10 to 15 minutes. And so I just think it's a testament to how awesome you are, man. And just thank you for continuing to develop
You're
the
too
tool
kind.
and offer this experience because, dude, it's priceless. It's awesome. So thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you, Troy. Always a pleasure.